When German forces crossed into Poland in September 1939, they unleashed a visible conflict of unprecedented scale. The war consumed continents and required the mobilization of millions of soldiers and massive industrial output. Military commanders understood that raw firepower required precise direction. To outmaneuver the opposition, they needed exact details regarding enemy troop movements, production capabilities, and strategic intentions. This requirement accelerated a parallel war of information. While conventional forces battled on land, sea, and in the air, a different kind of operative fought in cramped basement rooms, neutral embassies, and through the static of radio transmissions. The belligerent nations poured vast resources into establishing sophisticated intelligence networks, and they recruited mathematicians, linguists, safecrackers, and diplomats to build specialized agencies dedicated to espionage. These organizations fought with complex ciphers, intricate deception campaigns, and physical sabotage. The outcome of the Second World War relied heavily on this intelligence machinery, and espionage evolved from isolated spy rings into a highly organized, bureaucratic effort that dictated when and where the major battles took place. In today's video, we're exploring the specific intelligence operations and the individuals that tipped the balance of power during the conflict. And what almost every one of those individuals had in common, they could operate in a language that wasn't their own. A spy who couldn't pass a checkpoint and a codebreaker who couldn't read the intercepts were liabilities. Language itself was and is intelligence, and that's exactly how I've been learning Spanish and German lately with the sponsor of today's video, LingoPie. LingoPie is a language learning platform built on one simple idea. You don't really learn a language from a textbook, you learn it from the culture that speaks it. So instead of drilling flashcards about how to order a baguette, you pick it up by watching real TV shows and movies made by and for native speakers. The thing that genuinely hooked me was their history section, of course. I ended up binging episodes on topics like the Falklands War in Spanish and the Spanish Civil War in its original language, and honestly, learning the history and the language it actually belongs to hits completely differently. The catalog is massive, sorted by genre, level, and duration, so whatever mood you're in, there's something that fits. On the days I don't feel like studying, I just throw on a movie and passively absorb it. If a word trips me up or a phrase intrigues me, I hover over it, click to save it, and then jump straight back in. On the days I actually want to drill, I'll open up the short story section and read with real-time translation or run through quizzes on the words I've saved. They even throw in optional pop quizzes mid-episode to keep you sharp. That hybrid of passive and active makes it so easy to stay consistent and actually makes language learning feel fun while still allowing you to soak up all the benefits. So if you want to learn a language the way these people actually did, click the link below for an exclusive 55% off yearly plan plus 7 days free trial. Anyways, back to the video. German intelligence, the Abwehr, sought to establish a vast network of spies in the United Kingdom. They recruited individuals from various neutral and occupied nations and smuggled them into Britain via parachutes and submarines. The execution of this infiltration, however, was highly flawed. Many German agents arrived poorly prepared, carrying outdated currency, wearing mismatched clothing, or lacking basic knowledge of British customs. British counterintelligence, MI5, identified and captured almost every single spy Germany sent to their shores. The Treachery Act allowed for the execution of enemy agents, and some were executed. However, MI5 offered the majority of these captured spies the opportunity to switch sides, and many did. This operation became known as the Double Cross System, overseen by the 20 Committee. MI5 assigned handlers to these double agents, crafting carefully controlled messages to send back to their German controllers. The British fed the Abwehr a steady stream of plausible but ultimately harmless or misleading information. The Germans trusted this network completely to the point of funding it. They paid their agents handsomely, unwittingly financing the very British intelligence operation working against them. By the end of the war, MI5 controlled the entire German espionage network in Britain. The British intelligence apparatus also revolutionized the interrogation of prisoners of war. Traditional interrogation methods often yielded minimal results against hardened military commanders. British intelligence recognized that captured German generals and high-ranking officers required a different approach to reveal strategic information. They established a covert facility at Trent Park, a luxurious country house in North London. The British transferred prized prisoners, such as General Wilhelm Ritter von Thoma and General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim, to this estate. They treated the German officers according to their military rank, providing them with comfortable rooms, fine dining, and walks in the landscaped gardens. The British even arranged trips to London restaurants to maintain the illusion of a gentlemanly captivity. This relaxed atmosphere lowered the prisoners' defenses, and Trent Park was filled with hidden microphones. In the basement, known as the M Room, a team of secret listeners monitored and recorded the officers' conversations. These listeners were often German-speaking Jewish refugees who had fled the Nazi regime. They worked in shifts, translating and transcribing the casual banter of the officers. The German officers spoke freely among themselves about military tactics, secret weapons programs, and the atrocities committed on the Eastern Front. They discussed the V2 rocket program and submarine deployments, providing the Allies with invaluable strategic intelligence. The operation was a huge success, with the Germans none the wiser. Their only complaint was the lack of a tennis court. In 1943, the Allies prepared to invade southern Europe. The target was Sicily, as it provided a stepping stone from North Africa into Italy. The Allied High Command needed to convince the German High Command that the invasion would occur elsewhere, and British intelligence devised Operation Mincemeat to achieve this deception. Charles Cholmondeley and Ewan Montagu from British Naval Intelligence acquired the body of a deceased Welshman named Glyndwr Michael. They created a complete fictional identity for the corpse, naming him Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. They provided the body with pocket litter to establish authenticity, including a photograph of a fictional fiancé, theatre tickets, and unpaid bills. They also attached a briefcase to his wrist containing forged top-secret documents outlining Allied plans to attack Greece. The British submarine, the HMS Seraph, transported the body to the southern coast of Spain and released it into the water. The tide carried the corpse ashore, where local authorities discovered it. Spain was officially neutral, but the government maintained close ties with Germany, and Spanish officials shared the contents of the briefcase with Abwehr agents in Madrid before returning the documents to the British. German intelligence analysts verified the documents as genuine and forwarded the information to Berlin. Hitler took the bait and ordered the redeployment of German forces, moving entire panzer divisions from France to Greece and transferring naval units to the Aegean Sea. When the Allies launched the invasion of Sicily in July 1943, they faced significantly reduced resistance. The deception strategies culminated in 1944 with Operation Fortitude, the plan to disguise the true location of the D-Day landings. The Allies needed to convince the German military that the invasion of France would target the Pas de Calais, the closest point between Britain and the continent, rather than the beaches of Normandy. Juan Pujol Garcia, a Spanish citizen who despised fascism, played a central role in this deception. Pujol initially approached British intelligence offering his services, but they rejected him, and undeterred, he contacted the German Abwehr in Madrid, presenting himself as a pro-Nazi Spanish official willing to spy in London. The Germans accepted him, and Pujol moved to Lisbon, Portugal, and began fabricating intelligence reports using reference books, maps, and tourist brochures. British intelligence eventually intercepted his communications, realized his potential, and brought him to London. They assigned him the codename Garbo, and working with his MI5 handler, Thomas Harris, Garbo invented a fictitious network of 27 sub-agents, including a Venezuelan student, a Welsh fascist, and a disgruntled military clerk. The Abwehr believed these agents were real and heavily relied on Garbo's reports. In the months leading up to D-Day, Garbo transmitted hundreds of messages detailing the buildup of the 1st US Army Group in southeastern England. This army group, supposedly commanded by General George Patton, was a complete fabrication constructed with inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, and empty tent cities. On the morning of the Normandy invasion, Garbo sent a message stating the landings were merely a diversionary tactic and that the main assault would still hit Calais. The German High Command believed him and held back the massive 15th Army in reserve at the Pas de Calais for weeks, waiting for an invasion that never came. This delay allowed the Allied forces to secure the Normandy beachhead and push inland. The Germans were so convinced of Garbo's loyalty that they awarded him the Iron Cross. Intelligence operations extended far beyond the European theatre though. In the Pacific, the United States relied heavily on signals intelligence to counter the Imperial Japanese military. Before the outbreak of the war, the US Army's Signal Intelligence Service worked to break the top-level diplomatic cipher used by the Japanese Foreign Office. The Japanese encrypted these communications using a complex electromechanical machine that the Americans codenamed Purple. The machine utilized stepping switches rather than the rotors found in the German Enigma machine. A team led by William F. Friedman analyzed intercepted messages for 18 months without ever seeing the physical device, and in September 1940, the cryptanalysts discovered the underlying patterns of the cipher. They successfully built an analog machine that replicated the encryption process. The decryption of the Purple cipher, classified under the codename Magic, gave American leaders direct access to communications between Tokyo and its embassies worldwide. This intelligence proved crucial in understanding Japanese diplomatic strategy. The ability to read these diplomatic cables allowed the Allies to monitor the information the Japanese were gathering from their allies in Nazi Germany, providing unexpected insights into European defenses. While the Purple cipher handled diplomatic traffic, the Imperial Japanese Navy used a separate operational code known as JN-25. Breaking this naval code presented a different challenge for the US Navy's Combat Intelligence Unit, Station Hypo, located in Hawaii. The team, led by Lieutenant Commander Joseph Rochefort, worked continuously to decipher the intercepted naval communications. By the spring of 1942, the cryptanalysts at Station Hypo had penetrated enough of the JN-25 code to understand that the Japanese were planning a major offensive. The intercepted messages repeatedly referred to a target designated as AF. American analysts suspected AF stood for the Midway Atoll, a strategic American naval base in the Central Pacific. Armed with this intelligence, Admiral Chester Nimitz positioned his aircraft carriers north of Midway, waiting in ambush. On June 4, 1942, the American forces caught the Japanese fleet completely by surprise, and the resulting battle destroyed 4 Japanese aircraft carriers and eliminated a large portion of their experienced pilots. The shadows of espionage extended deep into neutral territory during the war. In Ankara, Turkey, the British ambassador, Sir Hugh Knarchbull Hugeson, employed an Albanian man named Elezia Bazna as his personal valet. The ambassador routinely took highly classified documents from the embassy to his private residence and left them in a safe. Bazna gained access to this safe, photographed the documents, and offered the film to the German Abwehr. The German ambassador, Franz von Papen, recognized the immense value of the material, and he gave Bazna the codename Cicero, and between 1943 and 1944, Cicero provided the Germans with some of the most sensitive Allied secrets of the entire war. The documents included details on the Tehran and Cairo conferences, and they also contained the bigot list. the highest security restriction classification, which outlined intelligence concerning Operation Overlord and the impending Allied invasion of Europe. The Abwehr paid Cicero enormous sums of British pounds for his services, and his intelligence was completely genuine, but the German high command largely squandered it. Factional rivalry within the Nazi intelligence apparatus and Adolf Hitler's habit of dismissing any intelligence that suggested a German defeat meant the Cicero documents had little strategic impact. After the war, Basner discovered another layer of the operation. The hundreds of thousands of pounds the Abwehr paid him were entirely counterfeit, manufactured by the Germans under Operation Bernhard. The Soviet Union also ran one of the most effective intelligence rings of the war right in the heart of the Japanese Empire. Richard Zorge, a Soviet military intelligence officer, operated in Tokyo under the cover of a loyal German journalist. Zorge charmed his way into the inner circle of the German embassy, becoming a trusted confidant of Ambassador Eugen Ott. He also built a network of informants within the highest levels of the Japanese government. Zorge provided Joseph Stalin with the exact date of Operation Barbarossa, the massive German invasion of the Soviet Union. Stalin ignored the warning, believing it was a British provocation designed to drag him into the war. Several months later, as German panzers closed in on Moscow, Zorge sent another message. He informed Soviet intelligence that Japan had decided to strike south against the United States and the British Empire rather than attacking the Soviet Union in Siberia. This intelligence allowed Stalin to make a critical strategic decision. He pulled massive numbers of well-equipped, winter-trained troops away from the Siberian border and rushed them westward to the front lines. These fresh divisions launched a massive counteroffensive that pushed the German army back from the gates of Moscow. The Japanese counterintelligence police eventually uncovered Zorge's network, arrested him, and executed him, but his intelligence had already saved the Soviet capital. The Abwehr attempted to bring the war directly to the American mainland in 1942. They launched Operation Pastorius, a plan to severely disrupt United States industrial production. The Germans recruited 8 men who had previously lived in America, trained them in sabotage techniques, and transported them across the Atlantic in 2 U-boats. 4 men landed on Long Island, New York, and the other 4 landed near Jacksonville, Florida. Their targets included the hydroelectric plants at Niagara Falls, crucial aluminium factories, and major railroad hubs. The mission collapsed almost immediately due to poor recruitment and a lack of operational security. George John Dash, the leader of the New York team, lost his nerve, and he abandoned his team, traveled to Washington, D.C., and called the FBI from a hotel room. Dash confessed the entire plot to the authorities and provided details on his fellow saboteurs. The FBI rounded up all 8 men within 2 weeks of their arrival, and a military tribunal sentenced 6 of the agents to death in the electric chair. Dash and 1 other conspirator received lengthy prison sentences for their cooperation. The swift failure of Operation Pastorius discouraged the German high command, and they never again attempted a major sabotage operation on American soil. Soviet espionage efforts extended far beyond the immediate battlefields of Europe and the Pacific. Ursula Kuczynski, known by her GUR codename Sonya, operated a highly effective spy ring from the quiet English countryside. She lived as an unassuming housewife and mother of 3, baking cakes and riding a bicycle through Oxfordshire. She built a powerful radio transmitter and hid it in her outdoor privy, using it to send coded messages to Moscow. Her most consequential intelligence source was Klaus Fuchs, a brilliant German theoretical physicist. Fuchs worked on the British atomic weapons program, codenamed Tubeloids, and later joined the American Manhattan Project. Fuchs passed detailed, highly classified information regarding nuclear weapon design and uranium enrichment directly to Sonya. Sonya relayed this technical data to Soviet intelligence, and the information provided by Fuchs and transmitted by Sonya allowed the Soviet Union to bypass years of theoretical research and development. This espionage operation accelerated the Soviet atomic bomb program, ensuring they detonated their first nuclear weapon shortly after the war ended. The successful theft of the atomic secret fundamentally altered the balance of global power and set the stage for the nuclear arms race. The German military relied heavily on the Enigma machine to encrypt their radio communications. The device used a series of rotating interchangeable rotors to scramble messages into seemingly random sequences of letters. The German high command believed the Enigma cipher was mathematically unbreakable. They used it to coordinate everything from U-boat Wolfpack attacks in the Atlantic to panzer divisions operating in North Africa. Polish mathematicians Marian Rejewski, Henryk Zelgowski, and Jerzy Różycki laid the groundwork for defeating Enigma in the 1930s. They constructed the internal wiring of the machine using pure mathematics and shared their findings with British intelligence just weeks before the invasion of Poland. The British established a massive, highly secret code-breaking operation at Bletchley Park to continue this effort. Alan Turing and Gordon Welchman designed the bomb, an electromagnetic machine that rapidly deduced the daily Enigma settings by eliminating incorrect configurations. The intelligence derived from these decrypts received the highest security classification, known as Ultra. Ultra intelligence allowed Allied commanders to route supply convoys around U-boat patrols, anticipate German offensives, and confirm the success of their own deception operations. Virginia Hall was an American who volunteered for the British Special Operations Executive before the United States entered the war. She had lost her lower leg in a hunting accident years prior and wore a wooden prosthetic she named Cuthbert. Hall arrived in Vichy, France in August 1941, becoming the first female SOE agent to take up long-term residence in the country. She established the Heckler Network in Lyon. She organized resistance movements, supplied local agents with weapons, and helped down Allied airmen escape over the border. The Gestapo considered her highly dangerous and dispatched the notorious Klaus Barbie to hunt her down. Hall narrowly escaped France in November 1942, hiking over the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain in the dead of winter despite the severe limitations of her prosthetic leg. She returned to France in 1944, this time working for the American Office of Strategic Services. She disguised herself as an elderly peasant woman, filing down her teeth and graying her hair to avoid recognition. Hall trained and armed French resistance fighters known as the Maquis. Her guerrilla forces cleared entire regions of German soldiers ahead of the advancing American army. Nancy Wake was an Australian journalist living in Marseille when France fell to the Nazis. She immediately joined the Pat O'Leary Escape Network. She acted as a courier, moving forged documents and money to help Allied airmen and Jewish refugees cross the border into neutral Spain. The Gestapo nicknamed her the White Mouse because she consistently slipped through their checkpoints and evaded their raids. They placed a 5 million franc bounty on her head, and Wake fled to Britain in 1943 when the German compromised her network. Her husband, Henry Fiocca, remained behind, and the Gestapo eventually arrested and executed him. Wake joined the SOE and parachuted back into the Auvergne region of France in April 1944. She served as a key liaison between the British military and the local Maquis resistance fighters. She organized parachute drops for weapons and directed sabotage operations against German installations. When her radio operator lost his codes during a German raid, Wake cycled 500 kilometers in 72 hours through enemy territory to secure replacement codes and re-establish contact with London. Odette Sansom lived in Somerset, England with her 3 daughters when she joined the SOE's French section. She arrived in Caen in November 1942 under the codename Lise to work as a courier for the Spindle network. She worked alongside network organizer Peter Churchill, gathering intelligence and delivering messages across southern France. German counterintelligence officer Hugo Bleicher infiltrated their network in April 1943. He arrested Sansom and Churchill in the town of Annecy. Sansom convinced her interrogators that Churchill was the nephew of the British Prime Minister and that she was his wife, hoping this fabricated high status would prevent their immediate execution. The Gestapo tortured Sansom brutally at their headquarters in Paris. They pulled out her toenails and burned her back with a red-hot poker. She gave them no names and no useful information, and the Germans sent her to the Ravensbrück concentration camp and placed her in solitary confinement. She survived the war and became the first woman to receive the George Cross, Britain's highest civilian decoration for gallantry. Josephine Baker was a world-famous American-born entertainer who dominated the Parisian cabaret scene in the 1920s and 30s. When war broke out, she volunteered her services to the French military intelligence agency, and she worked as an honorable correspondent, utilizing her celebrity status to gather information. Baker attended high society events at embassies across Europe. Diplomats and Axis officials spoke freely around her, assuming she was merely an entertainer. She collected vital intelligence regarding German troop movements and Axis diplomatic strategies. Her fame allowed her to travel across neutral borders with relative ease, and she smuggled intelligence documents out of France by writing them in invisible ink on her sheet music. She also printed photographs of German military installations inside her underwear, knowing border guards would rarely subject an international star to a strip search. She continued her intelligence work throughout the war while officially performing for Allied troops in North Africa. Soviet intelligence operated a vast espionage network across Nazi-occupied Europe and within Germany itself. The Gestapo gave this network the collective name the Rote Kapelle, or Red Orchestra. The network consisted of multiple independent rings run by dedicated anti-fascists and Soviet agents. Leopold Trepper led a major ring based in France and Belgium, and he established front companies, including a raincoat business, to generate funds and provide cover for his operatives. Trepper's agents infiltrated the German military administration in Paris and gathered extensive data on troop deployments and industrial production. Inside Berlin, Arvid Hanak and Harro Schulze-Boysen ran another crucial branch of the Red Orchestra. They held positions within the German Ministry of Economics and the Air Ministry. They passed top-secret documents regarding German aircraft production, fuel reserves, and the planned invasion of the Soviet Union directly to Moscow. The Gestapo eventually dismantled the Red Orchestra networks through relentless radio direction finding, executing hundreds of the network's members. German espionage even extended across the Atlantic into South America. The Abwehr launched Operation Bolívar to gather intelligence on United States shipping, troop movements, and industrial output from neutral nations like Argentina and Brazil. Johannes Siegfried Becker directed this massive network, and the spies used clandestine radio transmitters to send shipping schedules to German U-boats patrolling the Atlantic. Allied codebreakers eventually cracked the network ciphers and monitored their communications. The United States placed extreme diplomatic pressure on South American governments to crack down on these activities, and in early 1944, Argentina arrested the key operatives, effectively dismantling the last major German intelligence network in the Western Hemisphere. This eliminated a critical source of information for the German Naval Command. While Britain and the United States focused on defeating the Axis powers, the Soviet Union simultaneously ran extensive espionage operations against its own allies. Soviet intelligence successfully recruited a ring of highly placed British officials, known as the Cambridge Five. Kim Philby, Guy Burgess, Donald McLean, Anthony Blunt, and John Cairncross occupied vital positions within MI5, MI6, and the Foreign Office. They passed thousands of highly classified documents to Moscow throughout the war, and this included the identities of British agents, strategic military plans, and decrypted German communications. The British intelligence establishment remained completely unaware of this massive security breach until well after the war ended. The Soviet Union leveraged this stolen intelligence to secure a massive advantage in the subsequent geopolitical landscape of the Cold War. The Second World War was decided on the battlefields, but the intelligence war dictated where and when those battles took place. The breaking of the Enigma and Purple ciphers stripped the Axis powers of their operational security. The double-cross system and deception campaigns like Operation Mincemeat and Fortitude saved countless Allied lives by misdirecting German military strength. The saboteurs of the Special Operations Executive fractured enemy supply lines from within. These espionage operations dismantled the German and Japanese war machines piece by piece. The spies, codebreakers, and resistance fighters operated in the shadows, but their actions fundamentally altered the course of modern history. That brings us to the end of our dive into the most consequential espionage of World War II. If you found this information valuable, consider liking the video to help it reach a wider audience. Also be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below and let me know which of these stories you find the most intriguing. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new.